Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, that's you and me, we're gonna look at the story of Carole Garton. This is one of those tales that gets more baffling the deeper we go. So, you know, rock and load, put the kettle on, all that sort of stuff. It is lies within lies, conspiracies within conspiracies. What's fantasy? What's reality? I don't know, I give up. In this one, we have the mysterious The Company. We got the CIA, we got the IRA, we got the WTF, we have just all the acronyms. So let's give it a go. Cottonwood, California is where our story begins. It's a place we've actually been to before, if you remember the case of Mark Duenas. That was a wild one. Hasn't got a candle on this. It's in Northern California, south of Redding and Shasta and all that other stuff that's north of Cottonwood. Now I will list all the things that are south of Cottonwood, Sacramento, etc. On the 16th of May, a Saturday, 1998, as the early evening was setting, two friends were driving to a house in Cottonwood, on the quieter side of town. That was Todd Garton and Dale Gordon. They had been friends for a couple of years. They were in fact living together with Todd Garton's wife, Carole Garton, who was 8 months pregnant in May 1998. However, that evening as they arrived in the door, Todd Garton, when he was looking around the house, because Carole was there, she'd been there for a couple of hours before them, he was looking around the house, he couldn't find Carole, and so he went to the bedroom. And in the bedroom, on the bed, he found Carole Garton unresponsive. She was lying on the bed, and she was covered in blood. Their Jeep was also missing.
We have a woman. She's on the floor, bleeding. Somebody shot somebody here. I don't know what's going on. Her name is Carole.
The Shasta County Sheriff's Department, the EMTs, they all arrived swiftly. They dragged her body from the bedroom to the living room, but Carole was gone. As was her baby, too. It looked, like a robbery gone wrong. I mean, that was like the initial assessment. Someone broke in, shot Carole, stole the Jeep. Carole, she had been shot 5 times. 3 times in the head, once in the leg, and once in the side. The weapon used, they were able to determine the caliber, and it was like a Magnum. You know, one of those guns when you absolutely positively need to be sure. It was messy. It was a shocking crime, extremely violent against a pregnant woman who's only 28 years old. Shocking, I tells you. Carole was originally from Oregon, a musician at heart. She was a singer, she played in rock bands, and that's in fact how Carole met Todd. They were in the same circle in the Portland indie scene, and they started dating in 1987. A couple of years into the relationship, Todd went off and he joined the Marines, and would marry Carole in 1991. After Todd was discharged from the military, together they moved to Shasta County and set up shop there. Todd created his own fencing company, Carole worked in insurance. They had been trying for some time to get pregnant, and then it finally happened for an ecstatic Carole. And then all this happened. All that gone in the blink of an eye. Todd Garton was still covered in his wife's blood when he spoke to the police about where he and where his good buddy Dale, who also lived in the house, where they had been that day and how they'd come home to this. See, earlier that day, Todd and another friend, a Norman Daniels, they'd been working at a gun show not far from Cottonwood. Dale had been helping out there too. And they'd been there all day, and at one point, Carole, she showed up. She had a doctor's appointment, routine pregnancy stuff, and after the doctor's appointment, she went to the gun show. She hung out with her husband Todd and Norman and Dale for a while, and she was tired. She was heavily pregnant, so she said she wanted to go home, but she was too tired to drive. So Norman Daniels, he drove Carole home in her Jeep. A couple of hours later, Todd and Dale arrived at the house to the scene. Todd then discovered his wife in the bedroom, and so it must have been, not long after Norman dropped Carole off, there was some form of home invasion in this very safe, small town. In the home, there was no signs of forced entry, as we always see, it doesn't mean there wasn't forced entry, just there wasn't any signs of it. There was no signs of a struggle, shit lying around, tossed over, and there's no actual bullet casings from the shooter, the iron that was used. So what that was telling the police immediately was like, well, whoever did this knew what they were doing. They were able to maybe sneak into the house, not cause much of a fuss, and they knew to clean up after themselves. The last person to see Carole alive or speak to her was Norman Daniels. He was the lad who had dropped Carole off after the gun show. In fact, Todd, Dale, and Norman, they all worked together for Todd's fencing company, and they all were pretty good friends because they'd all been in the military. Todd and Norman had actually met 5 years earlier in Shasta College. Norman Daniels was a real computer weed. So the police, obviously, they wanted to speak with Norman Daniels. He had just been there. Had he seen any shady characters, mucking about? He wasn't at his address when they went to speak with him. And he was actually supposed to have been in work that night, May the 16th, like the same day they discovered all this. He was supposed to be working that night. His boss said, fucker never showed. Either he was on the run in the Jeep, the Garton Jeep that was now missing, or he was another victim. He had been there during this Commissarice home invasion. What the police did then was basically put the kettle on. They camped outside Norman's house until he arrived, which he did the following morning, which is the 17th of May. He arrived the following morning. He was dropped off in a taxi, and so the police said, here, listen, you. The police had also received word that Norman had been seen the previous day driving the Garton Jeep, the one that had been stolen. In fact, it had already been found. It was located in a parking lot not far from the Garton home. So things were not looking good for Norm. He was the last person to see Carole. He was the last person that was in the house before her husband and friend arrived home. And then he was seen in the Jeep that was taken from, the house. But why did he even move it? This wasn't making any sense. Was he trying to make it look like they initially thought it was? He did, just not for long.
Why are we here?
Norman's story of what happened the previous day was this. Carole, she was at the gun show and she was feeling sleepy, so she gave him the keys. He dropped Carole home in her own Jeep.
She had handed the key to me, and I was tired. I just was like driving.
Go straight home.
They went inside, they were gonna watch a flick, but after about half an hour, Carole, she was tired, she wanted to go have a lie down, so Norman, he stayed, he finished the movie, he went inside, he said, okay, hey, I'm gonna drop it, the movie was a rental, so we had to drop it off back, and he did.
Pretty well in the movie, and I was getting ready to take back to Carole. She woke up.
But he never explained why he didn't return the Garton Jeep. Like, he used their Jeep to drop the movie home, but why didn't he bring it back? So, feeling this was not the real story, the police then searched Norman Daniels' home. And, bloody clothes, spent shell casings, and even what was believed to be the murder weapon were all found in Norman's home. When confronted with this evidence, like, hey, you were the last person to see her, we found all this shit in your gaff, he caved. Like, immediately. He was like, yep, I did that. Sorry.
I can't see you now. Being my nervous to do this was just, I think that was the hardest. I'm thinking, I've got to do it now. I'm never going to do it. I have the pistol. Okay. She's laying down. She's asleep.
He said that he was the one who had murdered Carole. He said that after she went in and she had to lie down, he waited till she fell asleep. He walked in, pulled out the gun, and he shot her 5 times while she lay in the bed. He then drove the Garton Jeep away, he abandoned it, and then he stayed at a friend's house. He wanted to make it look like just a random home invasion. But what was the motive to fucking cruelly, murder a pregnant woman while she was sleeping? And not only that, one of your friends, close friends, wives. Well, this is, where the wheels come off this story. He was saying it was a murder for hire, and he was contracted by an organization that worked with the IRA.
the killer for hire. That they still assassin. IRA.
He was saying the murder of Carole Garton, well, he was contracted by a company called The Company, I'm not making this shit up, was working with the Irish Republican Army to kill Carole Garton. Now, what they would want with Carole Garton, I'm racking my brain. By the way, I'm not entirely sure what the link is between The Company, which is this global brand of assassins, and the IRA. In the court documents, it's just described they have ties together, and a lot of members of The Company, assassins, were also members of the IRA. It's like that movie with Harrison Ford, only it makes even less sense. Wait, what, there's fucking 2 movies? He'd gotten a letter from The Company and it was filled with, like, a world of assassins, operatives, CIA agents who did the old shooty shooty bang bang, all that type of shit. And so he got a document saying, Carole's on the list, my man. And guess what, Norman? You're in. You're up. You got what it takes. Norman said that, about a month or 2 months earlier, an envelope had arrived, a manila envelope, with pictures and information about Carole, saying that if he didn't kill her, well, he would be killed.
One of the pictures included Todd and one other gentleman. Well, Todd and the gentleman were X'd out through the circle.
It also gave Norm a time frame for the killing to be carried out, which was essentially till the end of May. He also said Carole herself was in The Company, that she was one of their own, but she had broken the rules and killed another member, so she had to be taken out. Now, all of this sounds like the stupidest fucking shit I've ever heard in my life. But Norm was adamant it was all real, and it had real consequences, as we can see. And Norm was saying he had been introduced to The Company by Todd Garton himself. They're all in it.
I was approached by Todd Garton.
Norm told the detectives that he had met Todd Garton years previously in Shasta College, and they got on, they bonded like real well because they both had been in the military, so they could kind of bond over that. Norm was an army engineer, Todd a Marine, and he told Norm all these like incredible stories. Stories like how he had traveled all over the world, spent extensive time in South America doing all sorts of, stuff. Like sniper assassinations, taking out drug cartels, bombing labs where they're making the cocaine, working with like the DEA, essentially all this like movie magic shite. He even told Norm that when he was 16 years old, prior to joining up the Marines, he had stolen a credit card and travelled from Oregon to Northern Ireland, where he joined the IRA. He said he went over to fight the Brits, and the reason he did it was he showed Norm he had like a Celtic cross, and he said he was of Irish descent, so he just felt like he wanted to. He'd been over there shooting British soldiers, and that's where he was introduced to The Company, this like worldwide assassination company that also, I guess, worked with terrorist groups around the world. Then, years later, after he'd been in and out of the military, he went back to college, and there he met Norm. And Norm, who was, blown away by these stories. And Norm, who had never left the States, who, when he was in the army, he hadn't seen any, action. So when Todd was telling him these stories of, rappelling down and snipering and helicopters exploding and, all this, fresh out of a shitty action movie, well, Norm was, hook, line, and sinker. And then when Todd said, hey, you want in? It also pays really well. He was getting, 20 grand a murder. I'm not sure if that's well to kill somebody. Norm said yes.
I'm gonna get mad. It's like signing contracts with the devil.
Norm even told the police this wasn't the first assassination he had been involved in. He said that 4 months previous, himself, Todd Garton, and Dale Gordon had all driven up to Oregon on a mission to murder a man named Dean Noyes. Their handler for this mission was a woman named Lynn. They went up there, they had it all. They had guns, they had silencers, they had bracelets, they had latex gloves, and they waited for this Dean outside of his office where he worked, but he never showed up. Then after that, they went and met this Lynn, their handler woman. She told them where Dean lived. They went to Dean's house to maybe kill him there, but they couldn't get through a locked door, so they ran back to their car and scuttled back to California. The police spoke with Dale Gordon also, and he too said, "Yep, Todd enlisted us both in the company." After the failed assassination, Dale backed out, but Norman wanted to continue with the company. Later, Norman got a letter with Carole's picture in it. He and Todd were, both shocked. You know, when the contract, essentially, for Carole came in, Todd had no idea his wife had made the list. But, well, shit happens. The company does not take no for an answer. So that's a plot. I guess you could say there's kind of quite a lot to wrap your head around in there. Norman was then sent to jail, and there he called Todd. But the police were not sure if this was real at all. Like, this could have been... Norm could just be a fucking crazy bastard who's making all this shit up. So, well, they sent him to jail anyway, because he had just murdered somebody and admitted to it. So they sent him to jail, and in jail, Norm called Todd. And then, after listening to this phone call, the police started to take it a little bit more seriously.
What's going on? Talk to me here. So you said you did it.
Well, I mean, they had a search warrant, and they went in.
Yeah?
They got the pistol. It was really obvious.
Listen, I'm gonna get on the phone, big boys, and see what we can pull here.
Okay.
Shortly after was the funeral for both Carole and her unborn baby, an extremely sad affair. Todd was there too, of course, a little upset, whatever. Though it seemed that at the funeral, Todd hit someone else to keep his spirits, lift his spirits. It was a woman, and she was kind of like getting pretty pally, whatever. Todd, like, it's not like she was grabbing his cock or whatever at the funeral, but you know what I mean. The police noticed this and thought it was more than friends, and that's when the detectives met Lynn Noyes. She was the handler up in Oregon. They had gone on to kill somebody, the failed assassination. She was a handler for that operation. The operation that was to murder Dean Noyes, Lynn's husband. The detectives learned more about Lynn Noyes. Todd and Lynn had been high school sweethearts back in the mid-80s, but ultimately she, a troublemaker, she had been kicked out of school. They broke up, Todd met Carole, but they stayed in contact. And Lynn later married a man named Dean Noyes in 1992. So it looked like the company was, in fact, a real company, but how real? Fact, fiction, say when.
I'm trying to help as much as I can, do anything I can, because I want to avoid as much legal trouble as possible.
You said it wasn't your plan to get rid of Dean, so you two could be together. That wasn't your intent.
That's not my intent at all.
Lynn would tell the police, "Hey, listen, I think that guy Todd, he's a bit of a fruitcake, a bit of a weirdo. I think he might still be in love with me, but I know nothing about the company. I especially don't know anything about trying to murder my dear, beloved husband, Dean. I didn't meet them when they came up, to kill him. What you on about?" On Lynn's computer, Todd's computer, and Norman's computer, they found the entire plot. Todd and Lynn had been sending each other love emails, while sending Norm emails from companyt@usa.net, claiming to be members of the company with various orders. Drafts of all those emails were found on Todd's computer. Lynn and Todd had concocted the entire charade so that both their partners, Lynn's husband, Todd's wife, would be out of the picture so they would be free to marry each other.
For some reason I thought he and I could be happy together. And then at that point he suggested, well, if you want to be happy, get rid of Dean, we get rid of Carole somehow, somewhere, and live happily ever after.
You could probably spin this whole thing as a beautiful love story. They had been in love since they were high school sweethearts and then kept apart by fate. And now they were finally trying to reunite. This is not that kind of story. Todd's unborn child, he couldn't have given less of a shit about the kid. He just didn't care for it. They found in Norman Daniels an idiot who would believe all this complete and utter bollocks.
Hello, Norman. This is the company speaking. I'm Mr. CIA.
You got the right man for the job.
We need you to take out a target for us.
That sounds great. Oh, just one thing though. How can I be sure that any of this is real?
Fuck!
Hold on, I'm patching you through. Hello, Norman. This is the President speaking.
Oh, golly. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. President.
And of course, I would be remiss not to mention that earlier in 1998, late 1997, Todd and Carole Garton had both taken out. Nice. Carole's was $125,000, with Todd being the beneficiary, and Lynn had just done the same with her husband Dean Noyes. So, kill the wife, kill the husband, you can be together, and you also get a sweet payout. Todd wouldn't say much when he was brought in, and he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. So Norman, Todd, and Lynn were all arrested. And also so was Dale Gordon for taking part in the failed murder of Dean Noyes. Dale would testify against Todd in exchange for a reduced sentence. Todd went on trial in 2001. On trial for creating a fantasy which led to the murder of his own pregnant wife, getting off on manipulating those around him. Todd was found guilty and he was sentenced to death. Norman, the trigger man, received 50 years in prison. Lynn Noyes, also taking part and attempting to murder her own husband, received 25 years to life. Dale Gordon, for his part in the failed assassination of Dean, got 10 years. Todd still sits on death row today, so he's still waiting. So I have no idea, by the way, why Todd Garton created the particular fiction he did about, the company and the IRA and all that jazz. I don't think he's ever been to Northern Ireland in his life. He probably just read it in a newspaper article, and that was it. And he just was like, well, hey, that'll do. It's a wild story of this whole world of assassins, right below the surface. It sounds like a real shit movie. An incredible master manipulator, though Todd Garton was, to create this whole fantasy world and get everybody else to go along with it to the point that somebody would murder. Because they believed that, it's a... I've probably covered stupider shit, but it's up there. Cold as hell, though, to have a hit on your own pregnant wife, just so he would be together with his high school sweetheart. As I said, I'm sure in their minds it's a beautiful story of decades-long love. They never... there was a fire that just never went out. In the real world, it ain't that. But you know what? Now they both have all the time in the world to create whatever fantasies they prefer. Well, maybe not Todd. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you being here watching this whole video with me. It means, really, I can't tell you how much it means to me, how much support I've always received over the years, guys. I thank you. That's all I guess I can say. So yeah, I'll see you real soon in the next video in a couple of days. So please look forward to that. But until then, please take care of each other, please take care of yourselves, because I love you. Mike out.